I'm a professional artist working from my studio in Essex in the UK and painting plein air in the countryside. In this week's YouTube demonstration, I'm taking you to Toulon to paint a lovely street scene in the heart of the town. Well, here we are. We've finally just moored up at Toulon, which is a very, quite busy but very pleasant port. It's my sort of southern sort of French sort of port, really. Really looking forward to a quick look round. But now I'm back in my studio. I want to paint a wider view, and when we got off our boat, or the tender that took us ashore, we pulled in to the harbour in Toulon, and this was the first view that I got of that lovely town. We'd got a flower market, the main street under the trees that goes up into the town, and so the exercise or the painting this week is painting Toulon, the lovely flower market in Toulon. Well, I hope you enjoy watching. Well, here we go. My first impression of when I arrived at Toulon by boat from the cruise ship. This really was the first real impression I got. A lovely flower market, the street, one of the main streets, these lovely buildings either side, a little bit of tree work, so decided to paint it. First thing I'm going to do with the large mop, I'm going to put in the that building there, like a pinky render, like a pink sort of render colour. Putting in that area first, the buildings in that area, and of course we've got that small piece of pink there. Just lift away that, just paint around those for the moment anyway. The parasols in the front there, right, yep. And the rest, well, the one on the right is a similar pink but considerably lighter, so, and no yellow in this either, so I feel it's more of a red pink, and it does have windows in that I've not put in at this stage, but I will do. But there you go. All I'm doing is blocking in at the moment, trying to get a feel of the place as I saw it. Good. Yeah, so that would then come down to there. Basically there's a bit of yellowing in a couple of buildings in the distance. It's like one there, it's a bit on the yellow side, all very light, very creamy sort of colours really, that some pretty much near white. Yep, that's good. Oh, and that creamy yellow is also part of that building there and its chimney. Yep, off to there and off to there like that. A little bit there perhaps for that. Any pinks there? Don't think so. Don't think so. A little bit of something on that. Light is going to come from the right hand side. Just made up my mind on that one. Now the tiles on these buildings are lovely and rich in colour, so I'm putting in the light red in for that. These sort of paintings I really love doing, particularly when I've just returned from these trips to other countries. I do like to get in fairly quickly once I get home, to try and build up a sense of a feel about the place that that really you can only get a few days after you've, or a week or two after you've been, really. So that's the reason I'm trying to get these in now. And then the paving, well, that can start off in this sort of nice pinky tones, plenty of figures kicking around in places. Oh, that pinky goes down to there, but that would be in shadow. So that's like that. Then as we come forward, we add a bit of, yeah, let's add a bit of that yellow to that as we come forward. And lots of shadow in this foreground, a little bit of texture to indicate paving. A little bit of this red here and there just to pull the eye to the, and I'm just putting some strokes, I mean, you know, just to give a little bit of feeling of depth to that foreground. Now I'm treating the sky onto dry paper because I want to try and capture the little bit of cloud work that I did see while I was there. Not a great deal, but just felt that I wanted to get that in if I could, like that, around those chimneys. That's a good thing to do, nice and red against the tile work there. There you go, look at that. And going around those chimneys, a chimney there too. I don't want any of that impeding on that. There you go. Yeah, a lovely little bit of cloud work whipping across the sky, and then weaker as I head down towards the lower area, like that. Around those buildings, if I can, just save those. A bit there, a bit there. Good. Just a little bit of red, sort of, just to give a little bit of a hint to the undersides of those clouds, just before they dry. There you go, look at that. Just to give a nice sense of movement to those clouds. That's what I like, plenty of movement. Now I'm going to just take the damp brush and just lift away any edges that are darkening up too much. There, tidy up the top there. Apart from that, that's going to do me for the sky. While the background is, while this area is still damp, I'm going to put in a feeling of distant land. It's quite blue, so I'm going to use the sky blue again, and it sort of like heads across there like that. And because I'm going into damp paper, I'm getting a softening, which is just what I want, which is a bit of luck. And I'm just going to go darker now, because that area is quite dark. Although soft edge, soft top to it, it's a distant hill or mountain, whatever they are in the background here. And then there's another one that comes across here that, if I can just maintain that soft edge, it would be nice. But if it goes hard edged as it goes up there like that, I'm not too concerned. Then as it comes down, it's going to have a bit of warmth, so a bit of yellowing to that. There we are, look at that. And that is sufficient for that distance area that cuts in around those buildings. There we are. Now I've moved to my small brush, just looking for my mill stick because I may need that, my smaller mop, to put in the lovely red of these parasols. They really are of a lovely red. They've just got a centerpiece just coming up there, like not much of a slope. Then it goes around the corner, and then we have a lovely bit of valance that lays like that, and that heads off down there. That's it. Putting just a little bit of yellow with this one, for no reason than just to change the colour really. And it's got a lovely sort of valance that hangs down like that. That then goes across there like that. There we go. Lovely parasols. Love painting those. On the other side we've got like a grey of, now I want to raise this a little there, because those figures should be taller than that. So I'll raise that up just a touch like that, which is quite a easy thing to do. Now with this grey colour I'm going to put in these windows. So we've got one there, one, not counting them as such, but I'm trying to space them in their rightful positions. That one's behind the tree, and there is another one there. There we go, possibly there. So that's the initial start of those windows, and while we have this colour we can just drop these in too, so that we get the perspective. We must remember perspective with these windows. So that's dropped in as well. And oh well, the other side is very, very similar in tone. So one there, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 2 3. These are going in again. They're like a nice grey. Drop them all in, I think, because that is the sort of colour that I can actually see. There we are. And there is some more on here. There you go. Perfect. Now when I paint figures in these scenes, I normally try, if I can, to create a little bit of life, and the main ones will be coloured, but the background will be slightly more grey and slightly less in tone and colour. So, but we do have a grey figure there that's in the foreground like that. We have a blue here, and then I clean the brush and we have a yellow there. Then I clean the brush and we have like a terracotta for that little chappie there that's talking to a friend that's got the same coat on. There you go. And the other one is a different blue, Prussian blue, slightly darker. There. So that's basically the main foreground figures in. Now I'm going to paint in the more background figures in a little less intense. So although they are of a grey sort of tone, and blues and greys and pinks and reds are nowhere near as strong in tone, in colour. See, this is blue, so these figures, yeah, we've got figures here that we can see in the background, and of course we do have some yellows, which there again are not too prominent. And you just keep dotting them in. Could this be a figure? Could be. Call it a figure anyway. There we go. Just not done any colour on this building on the left, so let's just put a little bit of this sort of warm grey. It's like a pinky grey. So I'm adding a little bit of alizarin to this, because I've not painted this in. It does need painting in pretty quickly with a quick treatment of colour. Shadow is going to be the key to all of this, to this painting, as you probably realise. Okay, now we have grey-green shutters on these, as you would see in the south of France, which is where we are. Toulon. I really enjoyed my time there. It's the old navy port, where the main fleet of the French Navy actually resides. So it's interesting, isn't it? And it has their Charles de Gaulle flagship aircraft carrier stationed there, and we rode by that and I did a painting of it.
Separate layer, which are the arsenal. Everything you have here on your left hand side is still the arsenals of Toulon. It started with, well, a protection for the navy, and then in, well, the 18th century, a thing called le bagne, which was basically a penal colony. In other words, that's where people
I'm just tickling the legs in. That's my term anyway for painting legs on figures, and it's just tickling really. Some of them are very dark, so let's give that a bit of dark sort of colour. A bit of brown, a bit of ultramarine, like quite a blue grey. There's one figure there with the nearer figure there, got sort of like a blue grey. This one too. And right, now we use like a brown really, or browny red colour for legs. And that gives a bit of colour too to the whole thing. There we are. That's pretty much all the figures required, I think. Well, I put chimney pots in, 1 or 2 chimneys, Didn't want to bore you with all of that really. Figure's gone in. Now I'm going to put in the greenery. This is going to be treated very simply. So Prussian blue with plenty of lemon yellow. Because I want to have this lemon yellow as the main sort of tone and colour for the tops of these trees, because they have sunlight. Soften that a little bit there. Probably be some dark stuff going shortly. And that goes up to there like that. Goes out there. Then as we come down, we strengthen that with a little more blue and a little raw sienna, just to give it that little bit of additional shading that will be required, because the suns are coming from the the right hand side. So obviously the left side of that will be in shadow. That's it. We will still have some light touches, which is there, there, there and there. Then as we come into the lower area, it gets really dark. Burnt sienna goes in with Prussian blue to give us that lovely dark green. That there we can pick up the more shaded areas of these lovely trees that stand in the area there. Look at that. Always a good thing to do. These lovely trees that you see in these lovely old parts of France and Spain as well. And we will have sunlight on these figures, and these trees will actually extend under there, holding the whole thing together there like that. And that goes into that lower area there. Then we have these parasols that are yet to be opened, because it was earlier in the day that we were there. There we are. A bit more darker tone now. A bit more blue goes in. And we suggest areas of those figures, the heads, but we don't paint everyone in, because if we do, it gets so complicated that you make smaller marks as you go away into the distance. Yeah. Bit more blue now, purely for the real deeper dark tones in that lower area, and there of course where that sun will be catching the lighter areas. There we go. And I'm going to clean the brush again. I'm going to treat the trees on the right in a similar sort of way, but this time just using the point of the brush as well as the side. Try and get a little bit more movement to these. Nice yellowy colours. Lovely old part of France, Toulon. My favourite of the whole trip really. Toulon has some lovely history that's attached to the town, and because of its naval connections. So that's That's what that's all about. And the left hand sides of these trees will be in shadow for obvious reasons, and undersides. We catch that just before it dries. Yeah. Look at that, isn't that lovely? Once you get the trunks in, they all of a sudden are trees. Now I want to show up the the red of this as well. Yeah, I forgot about that. This area is red too. It's like a table affair that the planting sits on there. And we've got a little bit of something in the background of a red. Now I'm putting a little bit of yellow with this because I'm now going to paint in some of the flowers that are sitting in the pots in that sort of area. A bit of red in them too. Got all sorts of flowers going on within that area. Put most of the reds here if I can. That's it. And of course we have lots of greens then. So I just use similar green to what I had before and dot that in here and there, because this is a flower market which really enjoyed looking round. Plenty of those greens kicking about all over the place. There we are. And then we have the pots that they sit in. Well, I don't know, dark blue, brown, grey, I suppose. Don't think they go a lot on their terracotta. Not sure, but let's have a look. All sorts of different shapes and sizes. But anyway, a little bit of that along the bottom edge there, bit there, just to give a hint that they're standing in something. Not sure what. There we go. That's coming along okay. Now for these louvered windows, I've mixed a brown with a blue and a little bit of red, and I'm just going to drag. Try and get a sense of a louver sort of indication. Yeah, there too. Just an indication of something. Go with either side as well. As the brush runs out of paint, it begins to look a bit more believable. But it will do once we attend to the shape of the windows.
Decided to create a scale model to facilitate the training of the young boys. So he created at the same time the real ships, physical ships for the sea, and scale model only for the training of the young people. It was built in the middle of the 18th century. 74 gun warship and 26 gun frigate.
Well, it was a very enjoyable visit to the Maritime Museum here in Toulon, which really is the heart of the maritime history of France, basically. It's very enjoyable, well worth a visit if ever you're in the area. Toulon, the Maritime Museum. Now I'm going in with the shadow work fairly early on, as you can see. Starting off with these chimneys. It's a blue and a red that I've got for this. And that then slopes more or less across there like that. That then slopes more or less down there like that. little bit of shadow work under the overhang, a bit down the left hand side of those chimneys. There we go, a little touch down there and under there, left hand side of those chimneys. Right, this is Indian red with, tell you in a minute, Indian red with Windsor blue. And I'm just showing the recess of those windows to start, just to square the tops up. And it's really that shadow that sets them off. And then of course there's a bead of shadow there and there where the shutters are. And look at the suggestion of that. It's not any way, shape or form clearly indicated. It's a lovely way of giving an impression, because after all, Impressionism apparently came from the French. So when you're in France, you have to paint with an impressionistic way. Well, that gives it that effect. Now I'm going to paint shadows on the undersides and the left hand side of these buildings. So I've got to get that building upright like that, and this just goes straight down like that into that area there. No shadow, no light shown there, and under there, down there, because that's all in shadow. Then we come to the light tree work that we pick round. Yeah. And similar effect here, nicely in shadow, and just a little bit of shadow there and a tad down those chimneys. If I can just sneak a little bit of shadow work, whoop, there, into those chimneys, that's nice, nicely impressioned. That's what I'd call it, nicely impressioned. Now it's the pretty much the undersides of there, like that, and underside of that, the underside of that, that and that. There we go. That's the overhang. I need to straighten these up just to give that effect. That's it. Perfect. And while I have this shadow, I'm going to just drop it in to the top of that window and the sill areas. Like that. Let's just get rid of that. Possibly touch on these windows wouldn't hurt. Like that. I'm really after that impressionist feel. I think I've got it. Now I'm starting the shadow from the side of that building there, and that then obviously casts under there like that, and then there is a light piece before we start seeing shadows over these figures. Now it won't be everywhere, that would come in at an angle. Some of these figures will be in sunlight, so you leave those unpainted like that, but some will be cast in shadow like that. Then that comes across there, revealing those figures there in a very impressionist way. Always the best. and then these trees would cast a shadow like that, and a shadow like that, and that figure would cast a shadow too. And some of these figures would have bits of shadow on when they come into the light area. And all of a sudden you've got a suggestion of figures in sunlight and some figures in shadow. And that's what we're looking for, really. Or down the back edge of those. That's it. Just gone a bit quiet, just until I attend to these shapes. I want to get them right. I don't want to spoil that as such. Can't really go too wrong at this stage, in my opinion. Figures, shadows there, bit of shadow on the left of the figures, and there, yep, gives a lovely feeling of figures within that area, and I'm continuing with that process here. Seems to be working, but not as much, because a lot of these will be in shadow. Just go around that there, but a lot of these figures will not be in shadow, sorry, because they are across the other side of the street. But that finishes like that. Then these trees obviously cast a shadow across there, like that, and down there. Like that. There you go. And then, of course, that would then all be in shadow down the back here. Or most of it, anyway. I wonder whether we could try a little bit of dappled shadow, where you got gaps where the leaves would be, perhaps, or perhaps not. Just sweep that up again, just so it all comes into one. There you go. And this would then be in shadow, but that wouldn't. This would then be in shadow, but that wouldn't, because it's heading down there. But of course you'd have a sense of shadows from there. So it's all very very interesting to pick up this type of shadow work that really will make the difference between, well, gives the whole thing a sense of light, really. And then of course we have that shadow there, nice bit of shadow work there, bit of shadow there, under there, and then of course that comes across to there, and then we've got shadows there, shadows there, shadows there, and then that sweeps across again where the parasol is, like that. And then these could possibly be all in shadow because of the parasol. There you go, look at that. And then you can actually put in some figures here standing in the shadow. I like doing that, forming shadows within, figures within the shadows. I have done that quite often in the past. Try and get the feeling of things going on in the background, like that. And we may have another figure there, another one there. That's it. And then that would be in shadow, that would be in shadow, that figure would cast a shadow like that, and this figure would cast a shadow like that. One would have expected, but one never knows. And finally I have some shadow work here that has got to go in. So that goes around there like that, goes up and across, that goes around there like that, that goes around there, and that tucks around there. That's on an arc. This is squared off, so it goes like that and like that, and then it sticks out like that. And then we have that area there. Okay. In actual fact, steps there. It's good. That seems to work. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a bit more red, and I'm going to create a shadow. What happens up here? Right. A shadow that sweeps across there, down there. So this will all be in shadow. And I suppose you'd like to know where that shadow comes from, and that I can't tell you. Because I'm going to put another one sweeping across there like that. Where does that come from? No idea. And put that in amongst there as well. Look at that. Doesn't that create a lovely sort of sense of light on the whole thing? That's what I like to do. And then finally in the foreground, a bit more Indian red in here now to create a warm shadow. And I'll pull that across there from buildings out of picture that send a shadow like that. And a little bit more red, sorry, a little bit more blue in that corner. And then a little bit more of the Indian red, just to give that strength, like that. And then I'm going to soften an area there before pulling another shadow into that. So we've got a soft shadow against a hard shadow. Now, as you know, I do like little finishing touches. I'm putting these in with the rigger, just to sharpen up some areas. Just little touches in that window, just to give that third sort of sense of light. Notice how I'm treating them very, very simply, because I don't want it to overtake the complete picture, but it would be nice if we had that sort of feeling in there. There we go. Even dropping in some dark figures now, as I did over on the other side, just to give a hint that we have figures in shadows, which we do, of course. Now, when I get to these figures, these are going to be put in using the dark paint, so I'm just highlighting those with this dark colour. There we are, look at that. Quite simply, treating them very, very simply. There we go. Bit more red, bit more blue. I'll give it a little bit more. Now this figure hasn't got an arm, but they have now. Nor is this figure, but it has now. Just a bit of life in that figure, and some plant work too. A little bit of life in the planting. And that's the flower market as I saw it in Toulon, just slightly to the left of where we got off the main or the boat that took us to this lovely town. From, it was like a tender really, from the ship Sky Princess. Just putting in some little images of these little touches there. Go. Don't want to make too much of that because that's the main subject. Maybe I should just, here, I'm going to make this a red tiled roof. There we go, because it is, but I'm putting it dark because that should then show up the sunlight for the area that's behind it. There we are. See how the darkness of that shows up the sunlit area. And then I'm going to paint that through. I'll just load enough paint on it. So there's a little bit of lining there, just to suggest something going on. And same down there. Treat it very simply. simply treated. Always the best. Always the best. A little bit of the ridge tiling suggested, and that I think is sufficient to give me an impression of this lovely old naval port of Toulon. Finishing off these little areas here, chimneys like that, chimneys there, this could be in shadow, bit of chimney area there, that's good. There we are, Toulon in France. Just going to take the surround away and sign up. Well, as you can see, I've taken the surround away around the outside edge, and I'm going to sign it at the bottom left hand corner in my signature that I sign up now. If I can get around the camera, I will. Difficult this. I want it this side. This is my signature that I have at the moment, and there we have it. Toulon. It's a flower market. My first impression of Toulon in the south of France. And this was the first view that I got of that lovely town. We'd got a flower market, the main street under the trees that goes up into the town, and so the exercise or the painting this week is painting Toulon, the lovely flower market in Toulon. Well, I hope you enjoy watching.